Good evening, Facebook friends and YouTube followers. This is Rich again, back for your second video blog of the day for Saturday, November 29, 2014, around 5:43 p.m. in Berwick, Massachusetts. It did not get to 32 degrees today, even though it was a nice and sunny day. It only reached 31 in Berwick. That's 1 degree below freezing, so not too much snow melted, but we're going to go in the 50s Sunday and Monday before going back down into below freezing Tuesday, and then the roller coaster ride goes up again on temperatures for the remainder of the week. Some news to report: the Boston College men's football team beat Syracuse by the score of 28-7 to end their regular season at 7-5. BC's going to be playing in a bowl game, don't know what will be. And the New England Revolution advanced to the MSL Cup Finals, beating the New York Red Bull by tying them 2-2, and Revolution won the series because of scoring 4 goals and the Red Bull 3 goals. The MSL Cup's next Sunday on ESPN, and that's about it on that. My next subject is about 6:05 p.m. Eastern Saturday nights on TBS. That means one thing: professional wrestling, Georgia Championship Wrestling, and World Championship Wrestling on Superstation WTBS. The professional wrestling was an icon show on Superstation WTBS for years. Georgia Championship Wrestling and World Championship Wrestling. The Voice, Gordon Soley, doing it for so many years. So many of the greatest wrestlers ever on professional wrestling appeared on Georgia Championship Wrestling. Georgia Championship Wrestling aired on Channel 17 in Atlanta beginning in 1972. Gordon Soley was calling it along with Les Thatcher. They filmed the matches at the Channel 17 studios on Techwood Drive in Atlanta, and it got to be popular. They had the wrestlers from Georgia Championship Wrestling wrestle there, and it was a top-rated show in Atlanta for many years. 1976, Channel 17 became Superstation WTBS, and it was beamed throughout the country, and they had many of the wrestlers from the regional territories all across the United States appear on Georgia Championship Wrestling. They would tape Georgia Championship Wrestling Saturday mornings, and they would air it Saturday evenings at 6:05 p.m. It was on from 1 to 2 hours. Usually 1 hour it was on when they had Channel 17 would have Braves baseball and stuff like that, and 2 hours it would be when they didn't have Braves baseball. Most of the year they did the 2 hours. Gordon Soley was the voice of it. Also Freddie Miller, some of the top stars in professional wrestling appeared at Georgia Championship Wrestling, like the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. He had the famous feud with the Assassin, and also Ole Anderson, Tommy Wildfire Rich, Abdullah the Butcher, Nature Boy Ric Flair, Harley Race, and so many others. And they had some famous wrestling angles on there where Chief Jay Strongbow's headdress was destroyed by Ernie Ladd after Chief Jay Strongbow put him in the sleeper hole, and the referee told him to revive him, and he tried to revive him a couple of times, but Ernie Ladd was out. And then when the third time he tried to revive him, Ernie Ladd attacked him and destroyed his Indian headdress, and that was a famous angle. Also, they had a famous angle in the Omni Atlanta they show where Ole Anderson teamed with the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, against the Assassins, and Ole Anderson turned on Dusty Rhodes, and the Assassins and Ole Anderson and Ivan Koloff and Gene Anderson were beating up on Dusty. Great angle. Also, they had the angle with the Freebirds injuring Ted DiBiase's neck and stuff like that, and it was pretty good with like Georgia Championship Wrestling. 1982, they had to rebrand Georgia Championship Wrestling on TBS to World Championship Wrestling because TBS was going through all over the country, and they had to have a better national name. Gordon Soley continued to host it. His sidekick was Rowdy Piper. The icon of this show during these years was Tommy Wildfire Rich. He was the icon of Georgia Championship Wrestling. Plus, he was one of the most popular wrestlers in the United States at this time. And they showed it to him with feuding with Buzz Sawyer. They had the last battle of Atlanta, a cage match and stuff like that. Great match. 1983, they had the Road Warriors make their debut, the Legion of Doom with Precious Paul Ellioline. They also had Ronnie Garvin feud with Jake the Snake Roberts over the national television title. And they also had a famous angle there where Ted DiBiase faced off against Tommy Wildfire Rich. Tommy Wildfire Rich lost to Ted DiBiase, and he had to leave Georgia Championship Wrestling for a while, but there was a wrestler called Mr. Ah who resembled Tommy Wildfire Rich, and they had a match on World Championship Wrestling, Mr. Ah against Ted DiBiase, and Ted DiBiase rips off the mask, and he thinks it's Tommy Wildfire Rich, but Tommy Wildfire Rich was waving to him at Gordon Soley's announce position, and it was Brad Armstrong, and Brad beats them. Ted DiBiase 1, 2, 3, becomes the national champion, and the ratings for World Championship Wrestling on TBS were getting big and big and big, but behind the scenes, Jack and Jerry Briscoe, who owned Georgia Championship Wrestling, a significant part of it, was selling to Vince McMahon, who owned the WWE. WWE was a Northeast-based promotion owned by Vince McMahon Sr., but when Vince McMahon Sr. sold it to Vincent Kennedy McMahon, Vincent Kennedy McMahon decided the Northeast promotion was going to be turned into a national promotion, so he was buying regional territories. He bought Georgia Championship Wrestling, and he bought the time slot at 6:05 p.m. Eastern on TBS. And on July 14th, 1984 was Black Saturday for TBS. That was the day that Gordon Soley stopped calling matches for World Championship Wrestling, and Vince McMahon appeared on the screen, introduced by Freddie Miller, longtime voice of Georgia Championship Wrestling. And Vince McMahon, people were outraged because they showed on World Championship Wrestling previous taped WWE matches through the syndicated programming. Got outraged, many fans. They wrote to TBS saying, "Why did you take off Gordon Soley for? WWE is not NWA wrestling," and stuff like that. And TBS had a new wrestling program at 7:35 a.m. on Saturdays called Championship Wrestling from Georgia, called by Gordon Soley, and it was owned by Ole Anderson, and they filmed at TBS Techwood Studios. WWE barely filmed at the Techwood Studios and for TBS and stuff like that, but in the contract that said from Vince McMahon that he signed with TBS and Ted Turner, that he promised that there would be original matches taped at the TBS Techwood Drive Studios, but they were infrequent and stuff, and Ted Turner was mad at Vince McMahon about that. So Vince McMahon decided to sell that time slot for World Championship Wrestling, 6:05 p.m. Eastern, to one Jim Crockett Jr. of Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. And with that money, which Vince sold for got $1 million out of that funded WrestleMania. True story, my friends. Vince McMahon stopped airing WWE programming. The Championship Wrestling show from Georgia, from Gordon Soley, stopped airing, and the Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling wrestlers were on TBS. Ric Flair, Ole Anderson, Arn Anderson, The American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, Magnum TA, The Rock and Roll Express, Ivan and Nikita Koloff, The Road Warriors, Jimmy Boogie Woogie Man, and Paul Mr. One Jones, among others, and the stars of Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling were on there. No other wrestling promote organization, the regional territories, did not send their wrestlers because Jim Crockett owned that time slot. He just wanted to showcase his own stars, which I don't blame him and stuff like that. And the ratings for TBS was going skyrocketed. They had a Sunday program of World Championship Wrestling that they filmed from the TBS studio. Saturday mornings was the best of World Championship Wrestling. And for the next 3.5 years on Superstation TBS, World Championship Wrestling was one of the top-rated cable programmings. Everybody was going to turn to see what on NWA programming on there, seeing the feuds with the Rock and Roll Express against the Midnight Express, the Four Horsemen, Dusty Rhodes, some great angles there. There were a few U.S. Tag Team titles changes, hands there. They had Lex Luger debut. He wanted to be a horseman. Calling these matches were Tony Schiavone and David Crockett. Gordon Solie was nowhere to be found. Crockett did not want Gordon Solie. And by 1988, David Crockett was replaced by good old JR Jim Ross. And they had Sting usually go on World Championship Wrestling and stuff. And by 1989, it was Ted Turner purchased the NWA Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, and they started to rebrand it as WCW. And the spring of 1989, they stopped producing matches of World Championship Wrestling from the Techwood Drive Studios, and they started to produce them at Atlanta Center Stage Theater or Columbus, Georgia, and it was hosted by Jim Ross and a very other heel announcers and stuff like that. I kind of didn't like them moving from the studio, from Techwood Drive Studios to Atlanta Center Stage Theater, but I think professional wrestling will stop filming at the studios of television shows to go to like other venues just to make it more of a national feel and stuff like that, because WWE was filming their syndicated programmings in arenas across the country and stuff. So NWA Mid-Atlantic, which became WCW, needed to compete with the WWE and stuff and like that. And it was continuing like the 6:05 p.m. Eastern on Saturday nights was a place to go to watch wrestling. It was a popular thing. It was the mothership. It was the #1 show for WCW for years. In 1992, WCW was rebranded as WCW Saturday Night, and for about 6-7 months in 1992, most of on WCW Saturday Night was kind of a talk show segment and stuff like that, with a WCW superstar or whatever, talking about professional life and stuff and storyline and showing some clips of previous matches. They only had one feature match. I didn't like that format, and they changed it back to wrestling matches within about maybe 7-8 months afterwards, because the ratings were going down. And in 1993, Tony Schiavone replaced Jim Ross as play-by-play announcer. He was with Jesse the Body Ventura, and I kind of liked Schiavone and Ventura as play-by-play in color. I mean, Gene Okerlund made his WCW debut on WCW Saturday Night and stuff like that. And they had some good angles, like Vader giving Cactus Jack a powerbomb on the floor, and Cactus Jack getting amnesia and stuff like that. Spring of 1994, they had a new set of WCW Saturday Night turned into a futuristic set, which was pretty good and stuff like that. They had Ric Flair versus Steamboat for the WCW World title vacant, because they had a match which was controversial at Spring Stampede 94, and Ric Flair regained the world title there. They also had some TV title changes, like Larry Zbyszko beating Lord Steven Regal and stuff like that. And WCW had the ticker tape parade of Hulk Hogan making his debut for WCW at Disney's MGM Studios. It was pretty good, and the ratings were continuing to go skyrocket in that. They had Macho Man Randy Savage make his debut on WCW Saturday Night. Pretty awesome, because at the time, WCW Saturday Night was the #1 show for World Championship Wrestling. But by the September of 1995, Monday Nitro made its debut on TNT, and WCW Saturday Night was turning into a second-rate show. They had Tony Schiavone and Bobby the Brain Heenan call it for about 18 months or so, but Heenan was replaced by the American League Dream, Dusty Rhodes. Some of the on road commentary was pitiful and stuff. He said clubbering and plunder and stuff like that. I didn't really like that. And you started to see on WCW Saturday Night, not the big names of WCW wrestling, but like the mid to lower card guys. They had a lot of jobber matches and stuff like that. It didn't feel too much like a big wrestling program, WCW Saturday Night, because WCW was focusing on Nitro as the #1 program. It was pretty sad to see WCW Saturday Night kind of fade into like basically a thing with like a Superstars or a Wrestling Challenge with a lot of squash matches and very few big angles and big matches and stuff like that. By like 1998, WCW Saturday Night turned into basically matches for WCW rookies or power plants. They had Mike Tenay and Scott Hudson call it, and it just turned in, and they mainly recapped what happened on Nitro or Thunder, and it just, you know, got very bad and stuff like that. By 2000, they stopped showing original matches on WCW Saturday Night, and it was sad to see it become a recap show and stuff like that. And by the summer of 2000, WCW Saturday Night on TBS no longer aired, which was a very sad way to go for wrestling on the Superstation. It was one of the best wrestling programs ever, WCW Saturday Night. It was a tradition for 28 years, and it was pretty good in my opinion for about 22 years or so, 22, 23. But when WCW got Monday Nitro, they did not focus on WCW Saturday Night as their mothership. It just became a B program, eventually a C program, and just a highlight show before it got canceled and stuff like that. I miss professional wrestling at 6:05 p.m. Eastern on TBS. What they show now is reruns of sitcoms or movies or sporting events. That's about it on that. I'll be back later for my third and final video blog of the night, which will be about Louisville men's basketball coach Rick Pitino. See you later, Facebook friends and YouTube followers. Bye now.